All my efforts are in vain. You know, that's the way it goes when you're talking to me here. Okay, we're going to talk about a very important topic, strategic metals, in particular Idaho strategic metals. It's every time you listen to President Trump talk, he's talking about these rare earth elements, these critical strategic metals. That's why he's talking about annexing Canada as the 51st state. That's why we're talking about Greenland. That's the issues in the Ukraine, really. So it's very topical, it's very important, and Idaho is really at the epicenter of all of this. So to start out with, this is where Dorothy and I live. Actually, this year we'll be celebrating 20 years living off-grid up the Yankee Fork. This was about in June. Actually, I don't know when that was, but it was definitely in the wintertime. It's wintertime. We have summer and winter up there, and it's still wintertime. We still have about this much snow on our front deck. Dorothy has not been shoveling it off. I bought her a brand new snow shovel, and I would have thought that for Christmas, but no. She shovels other things now in Boise. She's pretty good at it. So anyway, why this is important and why I want to capture your attention is that when I was a young kid, my dad had a placer gold claim here on Jordan Creek, and I grew up shoveling gravel in a sluice box. Well, eventually, we were able to patent this piece of property. And what that means is we were able to acquire title because there was enough mineral wealth there, or gold, that at that time, according to the 1872 mining law, you could be deeded property if it was economically suitable. Well, it was, and it was patented in 1983. And so we waited around until about 2005 to build this. 2004, moved in 2005, and we've been there ever since. But this is our own little piece of Idaho that we earned by the sweat of our brow and the ingenuity of being able to find this gold and make it. Congress in 1994 put a moratorium on patenting mining claims. And in the mountains around here, that's about all of the private land is patented mining claims. So people can't enjoy the real American dream that I enjoyed as a young man working to acquire title to property. And I think we need to change that, because the most important thing about the little guy in the big equation is 80% of all the major discoveries were found by the little guy. The little prospector stumbling around, finding something of value, making a discovery. Later on, the big companies come in and move in. But it's critical that we keep the mining industry thriving because of people just like you. Just think of your children or your grandchildren who go out and make a discovery and actually earn title to property. Because when you live there, you become the best steward of the land. Our little piece of Idaho here, you don't see dead trees all over the place like you do everywhere else. We cut them out. We burn them. That's our firewood. And we burn a lot of wood up here. I think I said we live off grid. So it's a better lifestyle. It's great for civilization. It's great to have raised my two sons up here. So they learn how to do things. They know how to do stuff. And it's part of the strategy, I think. I'm sending a letter that's been written by a fellow in California, actually Washington and Oregon, about this very thing. Dorothy's going to help me send it off to the Oval Office here on Monday. Because she's got the connections. Okay, here's my two sons. This is up on Estes Mountain. We're doing some core drilling here. It's a small operation, so just a hand core drill. We're taking samples, and then we load those holes with dynamite and blast the face off, and we're always hopeful, to find the mother lode. Okay, and this is up on, I don't know if you've been to the little ghost town of Custer, but it's a great place to take a family, show them the mining history. There's a museum down below, but this is up on the mine. And so we've always been worried about the fires that have been burning around. We've almost been burned out twice with the Halstead fire, the potato fire. And so the dead timber up on the Custer, we're cutting it down, and instead of just letting it go to waste, we bought one of these small sawmills. And so we're milling it up, and this is the end product. We've got two little cabins up there. We're going to build a third, The first one was the moose cabin, and this is the bear cabin on the right, and the miner's cabin is next. So that gives Dorothy an opportunity to, you know, decorate with all this stuff. So, you know, she's in there shopping for all the moose little thingies and all the bear stuff. And now she's going to be looking for gold pans, you know, something like that for the miner's cabin. Okay, but here's where the rubber meets the road. This is a net import reliance from the United States Geological Survey. It shows graphically what we import and by what percentage. And you can see that all this list, all the way down to where we get to yttrium or so, we import 100% of that. And we just cannot afford to do that as a country. Because it was and still is, if you say you're a miner in Pleasant Company, you know, you get run out of town because miners have got this horrible reputation. But really, America's strength lies in the fact that we have the mineral reserves and we must have those developed. We cannot rely on the Chinese to supply everything, and that is exactly what President Trump is talking about. Now you'll notice I have a little star by some of these elements, and those are Idaho elements. So, you know, fluorspar. Geez, there's a fluorspar mine in Chalice right now. We have mica. Can you believe that? You just showed me a sample of some mica. They use sheet mica for, it's called isinglass, it's a heat-resistant mineral. Okay, then we come down, we've got niobium, which used to be called columbium, scandium, tantalum, yttrium. Yttrium is a rare earth element, or is considered a rare earth element. We have that in Idaho. In fact, right here in Salmon, the Lemhi Pass and Diamond Creek are some of the highest concentrations of rare earth elements in the United States. Wow. We must have those. The Chinese completely dominate the market. Anyhow, you can see how fundamentally important these metals are, and they're in Idaho. Antimony, a huge thing. The Chinese just sanctioned us in August, cutting off our antimony supply. Well, immediately after, Stibnite, Perpetua's project there, was permitted. So they're full speed ahead on trying to make that happen because they have 148 million pounds of antimony reserves. We cannot have a technical industry without antimony. We cannot go to war anywhere without antimony. It's a hardening agent for lead, so bullets and things like that. And you're hearing a lot of sabers rattling, so who knows what the future holds. Okay, so when President Trump was president the first time, he put out this executive order. And he's saying a strong America cannot be dependent upon imports from foreign adversaries for the critical minerals that are increasingly necessary to maintain our economic and military strength in the 21st century. Well, after he lost his next bid for president, Biden shut everything down. And for years now, for decades, we have exported our industry offshore, mostly to China, some to Mexico, but pretty much all of our metals production and refining is done offshore. You probably know because here in Salmon is the cobalt mine. That cobalt mine is very strategic. It's the only single source cobalt mine in the Western Hemisphere, and we must have that cobalt. But the problem is they were shipping concentrates to Brazil to be refined because there's no domestic refining capacity. So we have the resources, but we don't have any of the middle part of that equation. Yes?
So Darr, just recently I read that there's a plant in Yuma that's being in Yuma, Arizona right now that they're talking about doing this with.
Yes, there's one in Yuma, and they've actually made
a good sized one.
They've made a plant in Oklahoma, actually, that does another type. It's, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they use sort of a hermetically sealed system where they gasify some of these metals and recover them that way. So it's completely environmentally clean, because some of these are difficult. That's why they were sent offshore for environmental reasons and regulations. Okay, so here, just March 20th, this is President Trump's new order. And I'm telling you, I read through the order, and he's not messing around. It's like, you will have this to me in 10 days, of all of the mineable sources of all of these elements on my desk, and you have 30 days to give me implementation plans to tell me how we're going to extract it. Now that is a huge order. It really can't be accomplished, but you can tell the seriousness of this, the urgency of this. This reminds me of the 1939 Strategic Minerals Act that was passed by Congress because they could see the war going on in Europe and they knew that we would be drug into it. And without that metal, without the metal that America produced, we may not have won that war. So I'm not saying there's going to be war, but it's looking pretty shaky. And America is not up to par to be able to accommodate. All right, so here's the state of Idaho. You can see the green is the National Forest lands. The yellow is Bureau of Land Management. And the gray is what's private. So 61.5% of Idaho is federal. And that's where most of these critical rare earth elements are. The cobalt is where the phosphates are, the tantalum, the columbium, the rare earth elements, the thorium. And that's kind of a problem. Because what is that going to be for Idaho? Will Idaho, as a state, have any benefit from the extraction of these metals? We really must know. Now, we will benefit from mines coming in and some miners get paid the highest wages of any industry. But, what will be left of it? So Idaho really has to think about how we are going to work with the feds through federal cooperation. That hasn't worked very well in the past. So it's something we need to consider on the political front very carefully. And here's the reason why Idaho has so many of these critical elements. It's called the Idaho batholith. Now you might ask, well, what is a batholith? A batholith is a large magma chamber that is intruded close to the surface. It is essentially the heat engine that has driven the emplacement of all these metals into Idaho. You'll see it's kind of all the way up the central ridge here of Idaho. It actually extends further to the east, but it's under some other materials. It pops out through fractures. And there's these huge fractures in the earth, large faulting systems that have helped bring some of these mineralizing fluids to surface. And that is what has made Idaho particularly blessed, let's say, with all of these rare and strategic metals. So this is a map from the United States Geological Survey, and it shows some of the metals that are found and where they're found in Idaho. This is some of the older discoveries. Up in the North Panhandle is the Coeur d'Alenes. Those were huge silver reserves. Idaho was the world's largest silver producer for a very long time. Now it's Mexico. They produced 2 billion ounces of silver out of the Silver Valley. A huge and economic resource for America. But as we come down to central Idaho, here let's look in your area right here. It's the Idaho Cobalt Belt. You can see the REEs are rare earth elements. There's Diamond Creek. There's Mineral Hill. This is the Lemhi Pass area. These are all in-place vein-type deposits. Very important, very strategic to the national security. Here I just mentioned the stibnite. This is antimony and tungsten, very important metals. Bear Valley, interestingly enough, they mine for niobium in Bear Valley and tantalum. Niobium is used in strengthening steel, specialty steels, tantalum in electronics. And I met a fellow here just 2 weeks ago. He's doing some legal work for me, and as a young kid, he worked on the dredge that dredged in the Bear Valley area. So you can see all through Idaho all of these prospects. I've zoomed in a little bit here to look at it a little bit closer in central Idaho, where most of it is. A good amount of the resources were locked away in the wilderness areas, the Frank Church and also the White Cloud Wilderness. I know, hey, everybody loves wilderness, but I don't know. There's the future of the nation's stockpile of metals are in there. And I don't know if you fly over and look at the wilderness very close, but it's It's a horrible mess of dead and dying and burn up timber. You know, we've got to take a different look at this environmental thing. People have a hand in it, and when we take our hands off of it, it doesn't look very good. I know you all see that. Okay, here's a more modern look. A huge deposit of copper found up there in western Idaho, north of Council in that area. Those are some major world-class copper deposits. I'm not sure about the economic feasibility of mining them, but here's Perpetua again, U.S. gold. Out here, a lot of gold. Anyway, Idaho's got the metal. And here's how the batholith was formed. You may have heard of plate tectonics. The Pacific plate is being subducted underneath the American plate. And in that action, and over millions of years, it's subducted materials down towards the mantle that heat up. And as they heat up, these are lighter materials than the surrounding basalts, and they rise up. And that's what's pushed up the Cascade Volcanics. And the plate tectonic movement has pushed the batholith up, because it's a granitic batholith. It's lighter than the surrounding material, so it wants to buoy up. And that's what's pushed up the mountains in Idaho. And also the tectonic forces of the continental drift, the compressive strengths, have buckled the mountains up. So you see the Tetons here in the east, you see the Sawtooths, they're buckled up. Mount Bora, you know, you go to Mount Bora, and on the top of Mount Bora you're going to find fossils, little corals and things like that. It used to be an ocean. It's just really hard to wrap your head around, but it is fascinating. Idaho's geology is fascinating, just alone. Okay, so here we have two plates crashing together, and it causes compressive stress, and that stress is relieved by faulting action. It's usually 45 degrees to the normal of the compressive stress. And sure enough, if you look here, here's Idaho City. Idaho City produced more gold than the Klondike runs. In fact, Idaho City was discovered in the 1860s, 1863, I believe. It pretty much bankrolled the Civil War for the Union Army. That's why President Lincoln made the Idaho Territory and ordered a survey from Nevada all the way to Canada in 1863. It's a phenomenal accomplishment that few know about. But anyway, from Idaho City all the way up here, all the way on to Shoup, beyond and up to Gibbonsville, you'll see these fault systems. These are deep-seated faults, and these deep-seated faults have brought these mineralized fluids up. As you travel the Salmon River from Stanley all the way around here, you're going to see several hot springs. Those hot springs are remnants of some of these hydrothermal fluids that are coming up from the high temperature zones in the batholith. And those are exactly what is deposited most of these rare and strategic metals into Idaho. Okay, here we are. So here's the RAM. This is Jerbois project. But you can see it's just a small part of the entire cobalt belt here in Idaho. Several of these projects have been laid out and found, discovered. They're mineable. We just need to get to it. And the cobalt truly is spectacular. It just is not found anywhere quite like this in the Western Hemisphere.
So, Darr, can I?
Yes, sir.
I learned a little bit from SND when they were in here, because we did a lot of business with them. And they did and you're doing an excellent job. I love this. So honestly, this is awesome. But he talked about the processing is different with this type of cobalt that we got here. Then I'm assuming that what they're gonna do down there in Yuma, because they're trying to push that copper mine down there, that the grade of cobalt's different, and so the processing is different, and it's more expensive to ramp up and change. I don't know if you could explain that a little bit, sorry.
Well, the mineralogy of each deposit is different. And so the way you concentrate that, you make a concentrate, you take all of the slag off of it, or the material that doesn't have cobalt, and you get a concentrate. Well, that concentrate has to then be refined. But depending on the metallurgy is dependent on how you build the refinery. So it does differ. Now, I know this was being sent to Brazil. I don't know if we can do that anymore. You know, we are going to have our own refineries, because even though we have the resource, we don't have the middle part where they refine it, where they manufacture it into the actual metal product, and where they then take those products, alloy them for all of the industrial needs that we need these metals for. That's what we've relied on the Chinese for, because they could do it cheap and they didn't really care about the environment. So, you know, everybody here has been wearing rose-colored glasses thinking that, well, we're getting our stuff very inexpensively from China. But, you know, our slaves are now our masters, because we have dropped the ball on this. And the regulatory burden for miners in America to do anything has just been impossible. So here we sit in a very precarious world. So I want you to think about that, because people are trying to scare everybody about Trump's tariffs and that. But his reasoning is, first, as a bargaining chip. You know, come on, we've got to bring industry back. And we have to if we want to maintain our civilization. And the tariff is kind of the bending of the arm to do it. The Chinese situation is going to be a little more difficult, because we really are in a pickle with them. But this is how cobalt has been mined, mostly in the Congo. And it's mostly by what they call artesian miners, just and a lot of it is child labor. The Chinese come to these areas and they buy the ore, and then they process it and manufacture it in China. But the labor's been done, you know, in the Congo, and it's unsafe. It's slave labor for the most part. It's child labor, and it's a damn shame. It's something that, as Americans, you know, you hear about conflict diamonds. Oh, we're not going to wear these conflict diamonds because some poor child is down in a mine in South Africa. Well, we sure like jet engines. We like to fly around, and that's where we use a lot of cobalt. You cannot make a jet engine, a turbine engine, without cobalt, or it's going to melt apart. So, you know, let's make the rhetoric real. Now we're going to talk about rare earths. We first have to have our little chemistry class. You might remember this is the periodic table. This layer here are the lanthides. These are the rare earth elements from 58 to 71. These are the actinites. The actinites are all radioactive. And included in the rare earth elements, up here number 21 is scandium and number 39 yttrium. These are all associated mineralogically. So, you know, diamond crypt, good example. Lemhi Pass, good example. You're going to have this whole row, and you're going to have scandium and yttrium. But the most important part of this whole deal is there are two elements that you must have to make these high powerful magnets. You've heard of the neodymium magnet. They're much more powerful than anything. But if the temperature goes up in an application where the heat might generate, or where heat might be generated, you need terbium, number 65, and dysprosium, number 66. Because without those, as the temperature goes up, the magnetism goes down. You put terbium and dysprosium into the alloy, and they'll maintain high magnetic capability. And these magnets are everywhere and in everything we use. A lot of it now is in green energy, but still even, you know, frictionless bearings that run off magnets. Many applications. We have a mine, the Mountain Pass mine. It's just off the tip of Nevada into California. It's been on again, off again. It's on again, and they're producing as much as they can, but we cannot keep up. That's the only source of rare earth elements in the United States where they're actually mining. And yet here in Idaho, we have the largest reserves. Okay, and here's a map. USGS map shows, you can see Idaho, that yellow bit is placer deposits where rare earth elements are concentrated in what's called monazite sand. You could placer that, or it's like a gravel operation. The little dots up here, yeah, that's Diamond Creek and Lemhi Pass. You can see they have several locations here in New Mexico. There's a little bit of plasters out actually in the Carolinas and some down in Florida, but they're not readily mineable. These really are, out west are the only ones that are mineable. This is the Mountain Pass mine where they're currently mining. So even though rare earth elements aren't really rare, they're rare to find them in quantities enough to mine, economically mine. China does have a lot of rare earths. India especially has a lot of rare earth elements.
Are we still processing our rare earths in China?
Most of it, yes. The only place where we're processing is Mountain Pass. But, you know, it's being mined around the world. The Australians have some, the Canadians have some, but the processing, about 95% of all the processing is done in China. So even if you have rare earth elements, you can't process it, you don't have rare earth elements. Okay, so again, now look how this plaster is set up. This is over the batholith. Again, the Idaho batholith is the controlling environment, geologic environment that is in place these rare earth elements. And we talked about the neodymium magnets. Right here is an F-35. There is 900 pounds of rare earth elements in an F-35. Okay, well, let's see, the China Strait is becoming kind of an issue. The China One policy is going up, and you know, they've lit up these F-35s, and they might send some big bombers to Diego Garcia, and you know, we're going to take Taiwan back, or so they say. And what are we going to do? Say, hey, China, can we borrow like, you know, 150 million tons of rare earth elements so that we can go and defeat you? I don't think so. That's not going to happen. And not that I'm really blaming China on anything. It's us. You know, I'm not China bashing. We are the ones who sent it to China. We did it. And now we're going to pay the dues on that. Okay, an Arleigh Burke destroyer, what has it got? 5,200 pounds of rare earths, and a Virginia-class submarine, 9,200 pounds. We cannot have a military without rare earth elements. Yes?
Did we ever have refineries?
Well, we have, yes, in the past. I mean, look at Butte, Montana. You know, look at the refineries that were up in the Silver Valley. They're all shut down, and of course, they're Superfund areas. And, you know, there's no free lunch in the mining thing. But there's no place where we have more environmental engineers anywhere than in America. So we've got to look at this pragmatically. Should we live on our knees? Should we become a third world nation, live in cargo containers and ride our bicycles and be happy? I don't think that's the American way. Yeah, it's...
Marijuana, so you don't think of anything.
That's right. Well, this is all, you know, we're talking metals here, but we're talking the civilization. We're talking about Western civilization, really, when you boil it all down. And I know all of us are from the stock that came out west. You know, if we were to raise our hands for everybody who's got family that were miners back in the day, everybody would raise your hand in here. Because that's what won the West. That's what settled the West. That's what brought prosperity to America. We've got to rethink that. I say we have to look in the rearview mirror a little bit before we can go forward. And this is the epicenter, right here, where it needs to start. Okay, so here we're going to talk about China again. You know, so we could be mining, we're not mining. But this whole middle section, actually all the way down, we don't do any of it. We don't do the mining, we don't do the separation, we don't do the refining, we don't do any of the alloy. You know, we don't have the metallurgists anymore that make the alloys, that make all of these specialty elements that run our entire modern industries. Our entire civilization is in our hands. And of course, we don't manufacture. You know, we used to be proud manufacturers. If it was made in America, it was gonna last. And it's not made in America anymore. And it's not lasting. This underscores all of Trump's policy. And it's serious business. Okay, now we're going to talk about thorium. And of all of the metals, actually thorium could be the most valuable metal in Idaho. It's a radioactive metal. It's one of the actinides. It's the first actinide. It's not as radioactive as uranium, but thorium in a nuclear power plant is 250 times more. There's 250 times more energy per kilogram than uranium. Idaho has most of the thorium. Now, the thorium is a game changer because it's safer. The daughter products are not as radioactive, and they don't have 100,000-year lives, half-lives. It's containable. The reaction burns up all of the nuclear daughter products in the chain reaction, which makes it much more powerful. Now, do we have that technology yet? No. Were we working on it? Yes. 1968 in Oak Ridge, they had the first test plant. There are more, this is from the USGS, there are more than 200 thorium-rich veins in the Beaverhead Mountains that form the Lemhi Pass district in Idaho and Montana. This district, thought to contain the largest concentration of thorium reserves in the United States, and is the site of the renewed thorium exploration activity. Thorium nuclear power is the answer. It's the final solution to cheap energy. Green power is not grid power. A small packaged thorium nuclear plant that would fit in this Sacagawea Center would power the city of Twin Falls for 50 years. You know, we must follow up on that technology, because guess who is? China. I think that's how President Trump says it. China. Okay, well, we did it because, you know, the earth is in crisis. The seas are rising. We're destroying the planet. That's been the mantra. This was the Geographic September 2013. So everybody wants to save the planet now. And we're going to do it. Now, you know, that works really good when the wind don't blow. And the thing about it is, too, you know, when the wind is blowing and it's at nighttime and you're not using a lot of electricity, you got to store it somehow. So you got to have huge storage batteries, these huge lithium batteries. And when you add up all of the resources that you need, see, those turbines, they have neodymium magnets in it for frictionless bearings. They have all of the things the Chinese make and that we don't make any of. And they don't really work for an industrialized society. And yet we've invested 20 years at least and $20 trillion to make green energy so that we don't burn up. So that, you know, the planet has a fever. It's bullcrap. Yes, sir.
I've been up in Texas and I've seen these. And what you're looking at, it's everything you see in that picture is a turbine.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not 12 of them. It's miles.
Miles of them. Well, you know, one of the first things that Trump did is he nixed the Lava Ridge project. And the Lava Ridge project, I'm telling you, those turbines, I don't know, these are probably 600 feet. They were 850 feet tall. You know, those will be the monuments to our demise. And why? We've got thorium. We've got a way around it that's much cheaper, that's processed right here, could be in America. And then, of course, here's the solar panels. Well, guess where most of the rare earth elements go to make these things? How many of these things do we make? You know, we've been pretty stupid about this whole energy thing. This green energy thing will be our demise. And this is why Trump's not pumping the brakes. He's slamming the brakes down. And that's why Lava Ridge does not exist. Boom, that was one of the first things off. So thank God, really, thank God there's President Trump that sees this, and people are whining and screaming about the tariffs and everything else. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a hit in this country no matter what we do, but we've got to get back to mining and processing these elements. Okay, So here I'm going on. Dorothy and I like this chart a lot because we use a lot of wood. There's 16 megajoules per kilogram. That sounds pretty technical. What it means is, you've got to split a lot of cords of wood to keep your house warm all winter long. Yeah. Okay, so wood's got 16 megajoules per kilogram, and gosh, natural gas, it'd be nice to have natural gas up there. It's 55. Uranium nuclear power is 3,900,000
Wow.
kilojoules per kilogram. And guess what? Thorium's 250 times that. A piece of thorium the size of a golf ball is every individual's power needs and their share of all power that is used for the maintenance and the building of the roads and your buildings and everything. A golf ball size of thorium. You want to talk about how much we have to mine to make a windmill or a solar panel and the lithium batteries? We would have to mine about 50 times as much as we are mining right now to be able to generate and hold as much electricity as America uses. It's absolutely impossible to do.
And then you gotta bury them when they're done.
Yeah.
Bury them in
No,
Kansas. why not?
I know. The environmentalists have created more environmental damage on this planet than anybody has ever dreamed of. Okay, well, here's my buddies over there in China. They're doing it. They're making, in fact, I've been talking now for a couple of years. I did my first talk here at the BSU's School of Material Science. They had me come in and give this lecture, and I've been talking now, this is 2 years ago now. The Chinese were developing, they've got it going now. There is a thorium nuclear test facility in the Gobi Desert that is in production. It's a 2 megawatt plant. It's not huge, but they are planning to go 10 megawatts, and then they're going to have, what am I saying here? 15, 20% of a huge amount of their electric grid is going to be fired up by thorium nuclear power. What are we doing? We got a little pinwheel up here, hoping it blows. Do you remember when the Chinese, the thing that they were famous for was making those little bamboo umbrellas that you put in your cocktail? That's about what we're going to be doing. We're going to swap places. But it's very environmentally friendly. Okay, this is a picture of the thorium nuclear test reactor in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It was mothballed in 1968. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we were in the Cold War at this time. Thorium was being analyzed, uranium, nuclear power was being looked at, but we needed the bomb. We were in an arms race. And with uranium, you can make plutonium, and you can manufacture nuclear weapons. In thorium, the thorium cycle makes it very difficult to do that. So we made a decision to go uranium nuclear power. And it probably was not the right decision. I don't know. Maybe it kept us out of World War III. It looks like we're heading for World War III. But it was a political decision, not an engineering decision. And that's the remnants of our nuclear thorium technology. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about niobium and tantalum. Now, you cannot find niobium and tantalum anywhere else in the United States except here in Idaho. It was dredged for in Bear Valley. If you've been to Loman, there's a little road that goes off north of Loman, about 17 miles to Bear Valley. And they dredged this after World War II because we diminished all of our stockpiles. Our strategic stockpiles of niobium, at the time it was called columbium, and tantalum were down to nothing. So I was telling you, I'm doing this legal thing, and I met this lawyer. He's 86 years old, and I'm talking about mining, and we're kind of gabbing, and he's $500 an hour, and Dorothy's going, "Shut up, Darr, you're talking too much." But we like to talk about mining. He worked on this doggone dredge. He worked on that dredge there up in Bear Valley. He was 18 years old.
Wow.
He was too young to drink at the time, so he was the one running the crew to Stanley to go whoop it up on Saturday night. He's telling me all of this stuff. But this is it. This is the dredge. They did Bear Valley, and you would not know it was dredged today. They peeled the topsoil back, they dredged it, and they covered it back up. This is the 1950s, you know. So we can mine without the scars upon the land, all of this jump up and down about environmental
Did
stuff.
he give you a discount when he knew that you was a minor, did he give you a discount?
He told me that hour we would charge for. So I hope, you know, Dorothy's pretty good with the numbers.
Yeah, good
So
job.
you're gonna hold him to it. Okay, we've got to talk about antimony and tungsten. This is some Idaho history that I think every Idahoan ought to know, and I bet not 1 in 5,000 know. I mentioned the Strategic Materials Act of 1939. This was a big act to promote all strategic mining. When the war started, all of the non-essential mining, like mostly for gold and silver, was shut down. But the strategic mining for antimony and especially tungsten was on full bore alert. This is a telegram from Eisenhower when he was the Allied commander in North Africa. And he's telegraphing this back to the miners at Stibnite, Idaho, and congratulating them in this victory in North Idaho. The munitions made by the American industry, labor and management, played a very important role. There is glory for all of us in this achievement. He's sending it to the men and women of the Bradley Mining Company, Stibnite, Idaho. We would not have won World War II without the antimony and the tungsten. And as I showed before, the antimony was for hardening lead that they used in ammunition. The tungsten was used in making armor plate for the tanks. And this was our main source.
Now, where's Stibnite? Stibnite?
Stibnite is an antimony sulfide ore. So it's an antimony ore. And that's what they named the little town.
Yellow pine.
Yellow pine, yeah, yellow pine, exactly. So this is the munitions board. I don't know if you can read it. I can, now I'm too close to it. But it says, in the opinion of the munitions board, the discoveries of that tungsten mine at Stibnite, Idaho in 1942 shortened World War II by at least a year and saved the lives of 1 million American soldiers. I never got that in my 4th grade Idaho history class.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've got to let these young people know just how important, how fundamentally important these metals are, and how fundamentally important Idaho is to the strength of the entire nation. Okay, perpetual resources, here we go. So here's what the drilling has proven. They've got 196,000 ounces of gold recoverable, and they've got 148 million pounds of antimony. Well, I was looking at gold's atomic number. 4.8 million ounces of gold. Gold's $3,350 an ounce now. You think that might be like a lot of money? Huge, huge opportunity for real wealth. For not mega corporations, but maybe for Idahoans. That fills a lot of potholes. That builds a lot of schools. That's the solution. Let's not tax everybody to death. Yes, sir.
In the Leesburg Basin, Revival Gold has identified over 4 million ounces of recoverable gold.
Revival Gold is one of them. There are many strikes now. The only one we don't know about is the one up at the Yankee Fork. But anyway, these are all very, very important things. We don't have to live on our knees. Yes, Sandy?
Does the Boulder White Clouds have a lot of minerals?
When they locked up the Boulder White Clouds, okay, I can tell you this story because when I was at the U of I School of Mines, I was in geological engineering. The guy I sat next to was a mining engineer. We all graduated. Most of us went overseas, got good paying jobs. He went to work for the Forest Service. And his first job was to do an inventory of all of the claims that were in the Boulder White Clouds. Because what the government wanted to do was deny their claims to these prospectors, saying that there was just no mineral there. And so they set up, and he was the geologist that went out and was to certify if they had mineral there. There were 3,500 mineral claims in the Boulder White Clouds. 2,500 of them they could not deny because there was everything from antimony to zinc. Huge reserves. In fact, ASARCO in 1973 made a molybdenum discovery there that is 10 times larger and 10 times higher grade than the Thompson Creek molybdenum mine out of Clayton. And it's still sitting there. In 1970, whenever I was a kid, a long time ago, there was $2 billion at that time worth of molybdenum in that mine. So they locked it away because everybody was afraid that we would destroy the environment, that we would destroy the world, and that, you know, the critters would die and everything else, you know. But that's been a very, very costly wilderness. And it's kind of sad because I live next door to the Frank Church, and it's dead. Timber's dead, the critters are dead. I'm getting the dead finger here, I gotta go. Here's Thompson Creek, Molly. Okay, and this is how, you know, China by far produces the most molybdenum, then Chile. We still produce some molybdenum, thank you, Thompson Creek. This is the Kumo mine, huge, there's $41 billion in mineable reserves. This is out of Boise County. We've got to have molybdenum, copper, and quite a bit of silver. They will produce and clear $525 million a year. The 2022 Boise County budget is $15 million a year. You can imagine. This is the phosphate mine in southeast Idaho. Without that, we would not be the number 3 dairy state. You've got to have phosphate to grow. And then here's kind of one of my last things. University of Idaho School of Mines, they closed in 2000. We don't produce them. Boise State's set here with material science. These are the guys that are going to invent the next supercomputers. We don't have those materials here in Idaho. We've got the Idaho Engineering Lab. Gosh, these guys are on the cusp of discovery every day that could solve America's energy crisis. And then, of course, the nuclear school at the university, or Idaho State University. All very important elements. This is the flag of Idaho. That guy on the right is not an accountant. He's not a banker. He's a miner. Remember that every time you see the flag. Oh, here's some of the gold they find up on the Yankee Fort.
Wow.
Pretty nice. Kind of give you gold fever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Oh, there's some more.
Wow.
There's a nice piece.
I've never seen those.
No, so I don't fish. I don't fish. I don't
He's
hunt.
got
I
it. I'm sure I'm gonna see
don't.
that.
Okay, there's some Yankee Fort gold right there. Little while we sell at the gold dredge. This is a little sawmill up on the Custer mine. This is where we do our thing, do some exploration.
You mean
You're
you're
all-
utilizing the natural resources?
Yeah, we kind of use them.
Wow.
This is a kind of, I gave some Republicans a little tour of the mine, a little geology tour. Here's the Custer Museum, Yankee Fort Dredge. Okay, now before I leave, I've got this book here. This is a book that Karen and Tracy have invested to help get published. This is Ron Nielsen's History of the Federal Lands of the United States. You've got to read it. It's very important. It's a complete history from the beginning, Articles of Confederation. It's only $20. You're going to get a PhD in federal lands. And everybody needs to understand this so that for sale over here. I thank you very much for coming, and we'll talk to you next.